had a list of things that were in the church. And we know that no church is perfect. You might have been before we got here, but we're here. But we had a list of things we wanted in a church. We wanted a church that welcomed us and wanted us to worship with them. We wanted a church that had a pastor that was a great teacher and that had a pastor's heart. We really wanted a church that valued the traditions and the great hymns of the church. And we mostly wanted a church where they needed us, where we felt like we would have a ministry. And we weren't finding that. I think February was a year ago, he asked me to come fill in one Sunday. And we went home saying, man, that church, everything on our list is that church. Except we forgot to put on the list that we didn't want it to be 50 miles from our home. We said if that church was in our community, that's where we'd want to go. That's just a wonderful, wonderful church. And later he asked us to come back, and we came back, and every time we came back, we loved it more. And so just the more we talked about it, prayed about it, every time we would say how much we loved everything, but then we'd say, yeah, but do you know it's 50 minutes from home? And, but we finally made that commitment that we knew we were supposed to come here, and we said we would, and that ride here has been wonderful. We enjoy sitting and talking. Like this morning, we were nervous about sharing with you. We're not performers. We are worshipers. That's what we do. And we love to play and sing, and we love to play for other people to sing and worship, and that's what we do. So we were nervous, but just to ride over here, talking and having time to sit and talk and meditate on the way. We enjoy that. He's made it very pleasant for us. So, that's all the talking I'm going to do. I'm going to play, and Sheila's going to sing for you.
This next song, you may not have ever heard it before. It's a very old hymn. I don't believe it's even in the Methodist hymnal, but it's called The Deep, Deep Love of Jesus. It's probably Terry's favorite hymn, and I found a scripture that it really comes from. I was telling Darlene this morning, God gave me this scripture to go along with the song, and just the more and more I read it in different translations, words just kept popping out. It was just so powerful. And I said, if I had a yellow highlighter, I'd highlight this word before long, I just highlight the whole scripture. It's found in Ephesians chapter 3, verses 14 to 19. When I think of all this, I fall to my knees and pray to the Father, the creator of everything in heaven and on earth. I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow deep down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ, though it is too great to understand fully. Then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. That's Ephesians chapter 3, verses 14 through 19. I'll sing the first verse. You join me on the second verse, and then Terry will play the rest of the song. loves that song. Terry mentioned that we've served in 3 churches during our marriage, and all of those churches have become our family. You know what? They knew our story. And I think that's one thing that's hard about moving to a community and finding a new church home. Even though they welcome you and maybe some of all the boxes are checked, they just don't know your story. Not that we're more important than anybody else, but going through some of those experiences in your life, that's what really bonds you with other people. How many of you have been at these prayer rails with people or in homes or other places and prayed with people over trials that nobody else knows, but you do? You really do grow closer to each other through that. Our first church was in Edenton. That's where I grew up. Of course, everybody in Edenton knows everybody, probably like Sandersville. I grew up delivering flowers for my grandmother at the flower shop there in town. That's, by the way, that's Dr. Oscar Bacon's older sister. That was my grandmother. And then after graduating from college, and Terry and I had married halfway through, we left my hometown and started new teaching careers in Houston County. It wasn't long before we joined the church and Terry was asked to be the music director at Houston Lake Baptist Church. We went there as newlyweds, spent 10 years there, and both of our sons were born during that time. And Terry lost his father also at that time. After 10 years, we were called to Shirley Hills Baptist Church for Terry to be the organist. And we spent 23 years there. The boys experienced their childhood and their youth in a strong, great youth program at Shirley Hills Baptist Church. We spent 14 years working in Walk Through Bethlehem, and that was just an unbelievable experience. Our children still talk about growing up in that live outdoor Bethlehem that tens of thousands of people came from all over to see for 14 years. We were involved in the music ministry, women's ministry, children's ministry, and our boys graduated and got married during that time. We shared many happy occasions with those church families, but we also walked through valleys with those friends. And like I said, when you walk through some of those valleys with people, like illness, death, heartache, trials that drive you to your knees in prayer, those shared experiences not only draw you closer to each other and closer to Christ, but you share a bond. Leaving a community and a church family was difficult, but Terry and I knew wherever we went that God would be with us. growing up in Edenton, meeting and marrying Terry, the premature birth of our first son. He was born 2 months premature the week of my sister's wedding. And when you see Ryan today, you never know he was a little 4 pound, 6.5 ounce baby boy. But how about the car accident that nearly took our younger son's life? And I really didn't have this in my notes, but I must share it. Jonathan will tell you that the verse in Jeremiah that talks about God having a plan and a purpose for your life. When we went back to the scene of his car accident, he was actually driving from Columbus State, where he was a student, to Richland, where he served as church pianist. He fell asleep at the wheel, and his car flipped numerous times. It was heading toward a forest, and instead he hit a culvert that started a bumper-to-bumper flip of his car. And everything that was in that car was all in the trees. And someone stopped to help him. But if you saw the car, we went to the place where they took the car, and there were 3 other cars, and his was the worst. I didn't even recognize it. In one of the other vehicles, one person died, another one, a person had multiple injuries. Our son crawled out of that upside-down car with just scratches from the glass. That's just, and when we went back to the scene of the accident and started picking up things, we found a magnet. A magnet my mother had just given him a few weeks before, and it had that scripture on it. Jeremiah 29, about God having a plan. That son of ours is a trauma nurse in the emergency room in Macon now. And wow, every time we see those pictures and talk about it, experience. You know, you all have experiences, maybe not the same, but just look. God's hand is all over your life, and he's all around you every day. But the story that probably has had the most impact more recently on our lives was when our church family prayed for the adoption of our grandson, Justice. Our son went on a mission trip with my father, Coast for Christ Ministries. Dan Hodges was associational missionary at that time over in Milledgeville. But he took our son with him that year, 2007. It was a life-changing experience. He and Sarah married in 2008, and he said, "Sarah, you gotta go." And they went in 2009 and experienced some amazing things. As they were on the plane that August coming back, God planted a seed of desire in both of their hearts to adopt a child from Ghana. And what's amazing, this is just another amazing thing when you start looking at all the details. That was the end of August of 2009. When we saw Justice's birth certificate, his birth was September 3rd. God had a plan for that little child's life before he even took his first breath. And people continue to talk about, oh, what a blessing that child is. Wow. For that child to be plucked out of a life of poverty and where he didn't really have anybody holding his hand and watching over and protecting him, but he was trying to find food to eat. You know, for God to pick our family to have this child, we're the blessed ones. But when they came back from their trip to Ghana, they selected an adoption agency. They began the process, and nearly 2 years later, they received the first picture and an ad. We couldn't share it by email or Facebook or anything, but I can tell you, I printed that picture and laminated it, and I had to do that several times because I kept pulling it out, and showing it. I wish I had that picture to show you, that little smiling face, holding his hand, standing in flip-flops. From the moment we saw that smile, oh, he stole our hearts. We loved him from that moment. So finally, from the time they got the picture, it was probably close to 2 years before they finally got permission to go over and meet him for the first time and to go to court. And that's another story in itself. But to go to court and adopt him, legally adopt him, and he had his name. They picked the name Justice. They used his actual Ghanaian last name, Tago, and then Clopton. And they expected this child for it to be about 3 months before they would come back and the documents would all be completed. They would come back and get him. This 3-year-old spoke very little English, but the moment Sarah saw him, he ran across that hotel lobby and jumped into her arms. Sarah actually was there on Mother's Day and got to hold him for her very first Mother's Day. They came back and they immediately painted the room, bought a bed, fixed up a little boy's room, a baseball theme, and waited. It's just going to be a matter of weeks, right? Then nothing happened. Month after month of passing that room, all prepared for a little boy, stayed empty. Phone calls, emails, nothing was happening. Fees had to continue to be paid to keep the adoption case open. The VC hearing just was not being approved. Questions went unanswered. After about 19 months of waiting, people began to ask them and us, is this ever going to happen? Are you ever going to get that child? Why don't you, some even suggested, why don't you just go with another adoption agency and start all over? But that child over there in Ghana has their name. One lady at our church 2 years before had already stitched his name and made his blanket. We just could not give up. About that time, the church, Terry didn't know it, but the church, Shirley Hills Baptist Church, was planning a surprise to honor him for 20 years of music ministry service. So Ryan and Sarah came down from Wake Forest, North Carolina, and they were there for that day. At the end of the service, our pastor, Andy Cook, called them forward and they said, we know you're very discouraged. We're going to call on God. The people of God are going to call on Him. We're going to claim His power to bring this child home. About 48 hours later, they were contacted and said, get your passports ready, book your flight. You're going to Ghana December the 27th. They didn't come home for Christmas, but that's okay. I went to Walmart and bought a cuddly little dog and a toy car and a plane and express mailed it to them in North Carolina. I'd heard he cried and screamed the first time he got put in a car to bring to them because he'd never been in a car before. And I thought, well, he might feel like that about the plane. So I express mailed that and they arrived. They left on December the 27th. The VC hearing was on December 30th, Terry's birthday. Our time, the hearing was taking place at about 3:30 in the morning, and I let people know about that. Please pray. Please pray. We were actually at the lake in a camper on our knees on the floor, and my phone started dinging. We were up praying. That VC hearing took about 3.5 hours because there was a language barrier, and the lady that was keeping him had only known him by his nickname, not by his real name, so there was a little problem working through all that. But in the meantime, after the VC hearing, Washington, D.C.'s computers shut down, and then they were closed on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and they were supposed to fly out on January the 2nd. Everything finally came through, all the documentation to leave on January the 2nd. After about 22 hours of flying, they arrived later than expected at the Raleigh-Durham airport, expecting one person to pick them up. Over 50 people were at the airport cheering and clapping, holding signs, welcome home. Some of those were children who had known that story for 4.5 years. You know, we teach these children back here in Sunday school, it's so important about all the miracles of God in the Old and New Testament. But those children that were there that night, wow, they'll never forget that. The people that prayed in our church with us, they'll never forget that. And I can guarantee you the children that were in my classroom at school heard it. And they heard it every year at Thanksgiving when I taught a story about being grateful. Never forget that. God's power to perform miracles didn't end with the last book of the Bible. He's performing miracles today. Every time I look at justice, that's proof that we have a powerful God. And you know, He's right there with us through everything. What kind of journey are you on today? What's your story? Are you in need of a miracle too? Do you know the life story of the person sitting next to you? Perhaps sharing your story or your journey of holding on to your faith in difficult circumstances. How God brought you through it is what someone else needs to hear today. Just one.